Hey, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. It's time to start. So what I'm going to do is make a couple announcements. We're going to go through the homework from last night. You do not need to hand in the homework. It's yours to keep. That way you can use it as a study guide. And then we'll start doing chapters 3 and 4 today. We should complete that in time enough for us to be out by 4:30, so there should be no delays. Now, if anybody has any basic questions about things, hold on a minute. Let me make some announcements, and then we'll see what else we can help you with. So I'm going to moderate the conversation real quick and make some basic announcements. Number one, there is no recording of our licensing class. The Real Estate Commission is very clear. It states right in your handbook. The Real Estate Commission prohibits recording of any pre-licensing classes. So please, no video, no audio recordings. It's not allowed. I can't stop you. Do what you want to do. But if the Real Estate Commission finds out, your license is in jeopardy. So take your own risk. Do whatever you want. Secondly, and I had to remind people a couple times yesterday, no posting of any links in our chat sessions here. If you have links you want people to look at, you'll need to submit them to me via email so I can review them first. We've had trouble in the past and had our service disrupted terribly because people threw in some very nasty stuff and links, and we can't afford to have that anymore. So please don't do that. I shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Please, no foul language when we have discussions. If you have trouble with your connections, there's a couple things you can do. Number one, and I suggest this to everybody, close out any and all other operating applications or programs you have running at this on your phone, desktop, tablet, whatever you're using. They tend to soak up, especially social media pages, a lot of bandwidth. And our signal is audio and video. It demands a lot of your bandwidth. So if you're running other programs, you're going to have a lousy signal. So close all those other programs out. Any apps that you're running, close them out and only have this open. It will help you get a better signal and keep it. If you have additional issues, you can always hit the reset button. That's a little semicircle with an arrow up by your address bar on top of your PC or desktop. Just click that. It brings you back. You have to log in again, but it should be no problem. You'll get a better, stronger signal. If you have questions about administrative process, how to do something, where do I find this? What do I do about that? What about this? What about tests, schedules, all that other good stuff? You can go to recareercenter.com and look all that information up at your leisure. Or you can wait till noon when either Lauren or Noel will come online and answer your questions. Now, when they come online at noon, they're only going to be around for about 20 minutes to a half hour tops. So if you go away and get lunch and then come back and want to ask them questions, well, chances are they've already answered your question 3 or 4 times, and they don't like to have to repeat. So if you have questions, stay online when we break for lunch. Ask your question and then do whatever you need to do. That way, they don't have to repeat themselves and waste time and drag everybody down. It's no fun to do that. If you have any other types of questions about real estate or things like that, you can always submit them to me at the end of the day. I'll stay online with you after class is over, and you can ask any questions you want, and if it's appropriate, I'll direct you to the proper resource, answer your questions outright, or just tell you I can't help you. Excuse me. And we take breaks during the day. We take a half-hour break at 10:30. We take a 1-hour lunch break at 12, and we take a half-hour break at 2:30, and we finish up around 4:30. And as I say every morning, it's always important to pre-read your chapters before you come to class. Believe me when I tell you this, guys. If you pre-read these chapters, you'll already have a basic understanding of the knowledge, and our discussion will do nothing less than solidify that knowledge in your head or confirm your information. If you don't pre-read the chapters, when I introduce a topic, it may be new or foreign to you, and you may have many questions, which tend to drag out our classroom time and time again. It happens all the time. Also, if you do have questions regarding topics in the real estate world, Please keep them until the topics are being discussed. There are 21 chapters in this book. If you want to know about, title issues, well, there's a chapter just all for that, and we'll get to it. So please keep your questions pertinent to the topics being discussed during the classroom presentation, and we should have no problem moving forward. So before I do the homework review, does anybody have any basic questions about how things work here? And I'm not seeing any. Up there is a question, so I'll hang on. A couple questions. How were we supposed to do the quiz? Talking about your homework quiz? You go to recareercenter.com/homework, download the questions, and do them. You don't hand them in, you keep them. No, you don't submit your homework quizzes to us. You keep them. They're for your study guides. That's why we go over them every morning. No, you don't have to hand them in. Was there any questions about what we're doing before we start? The website was down for the homework for about 20 minutes last night. Okay, well, it's been about 12 hours since 9 o'clock last night, so I'm sure there was plenty of time to download those questions since then. Can you please tell me the line for homework? What line are you talking about, Deval? What line? Are you talking about the web address for the homework? If that's so, okay. Well, again, it was given to you yesterday by Lauren and Noel at lunchtime, but I'll put it in again. And I also put it up there yesterday afternoon. Please, David Botwin, please remove that link immediately or you will be expelled. Probably you didn't hear me again state there are no links to be posted on our chat session. Thank you. Is there any other question before we start? Okay, so we have the answers to the quiz questions somewhere. I'm about to give them to you. And that's why we're going over the homework in the next minute or two. So I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to moderate the conversation. And we're going to go over the homework from last night first. And then we're going to do chapters 3 and 4. So for chapter 1 homework quizzes last night, the answers to the chapter 1 homework quiz are as follows. Number 1 is D as in dog, 2, C, 3, B for boy, 4, B for boy, 5A, 6, B for boy, 7, D as in dog, 8, D as in dog, 9, C, and 10A. Again, chapter 1 homework question answers are number 1, D, dog, 2, C, 3, B, boy, 4, B, boy, 5A, 6, B, boy, 7, D, dog, 8, D, dog, 9, C, and 10A. For chapter 2, the answers to your homework questions are as follows. Number 1, A. Number 2, D for dog. Number 3, B for boy. 4, C. 5, B as in boy. 6A. 7, D as in dog. 8, D as in dog. 9, B for boy, and 10, D as in dog. Once again, Chapter 2 homework answers are number 1, A, 2, D, dog, 3, B, boy, 4, C, 5, B, boy, 6, A, 7, D, dog, 8, D, dog, 9, B, boy, and 10, D, dog. All right, that was the homework answers from last night. So, if you're ready, let's start chapters 3 and 4 and get them under our belts today. So, chapter 3 is where we're at. Agency, brokerage, and ethical considerations. Now, at the end of this chapter, you should be able to identify types of agency and fiduciary responsibilities, as well as describe the broker-salesperson relationships and compensation issues. You'll also be able to discuss the disclosures to sellers and buyers relating to creating agency and providing material information. You'll also be able to describe misrepresentation, Consumer Fraud Act, antitrust laws, ethical considerations, and disciplinable offenses as forms of consumer protections. Now, that's a lot of stuff, and it's a big chapter, and we've got a lot to cover. So, let's get busy. But before I start, I see a lot of people still trying to type questions, so let me open it up and find out what questions you have before we start. I see David Swindle typing, so I'll wait for his question. And Hong Shun will we'll wait for his question. No, you guys don't have questions? And please do not open your dialog bars, guys. It looks like you're typing questions. That's why I'm waiting for you. Okay, so nobody has questions. So please, guys, keep your hands off your dialog bar and your mouse off the dialog bar, because it looks like you're asking questions, and I'll stop for questions, believe me. But I don't want to waste time, so please be conscious of that. All right, move on. Let's move on. Brokerage defined. Well, brokerage. What is brokerage? I don't care if you're a stock broker, a mortgage broker, a real estate broker, an insurance broker. What is brokerage? Brokerage is the business of bringing buyers and sellers together in a marketplace. It's actually very easy to understand. My job is to have this guy who wants to sell and this guy who wants to buy come together in the real estate marketplace and do a deal. That's my job, to do that business of bringing buyers and sellers together. My business is also bringing landlords and tenants together in the real estate marketplace. So as you can tell, my business of brokerage means dealing with buyers and sellers, landlords and tenants, bring them together, creating happy marriages, and I collect a fee for doing my job. In New Jersey, we talked yesterday about the New Jersey licensing laws for real estate practitioners. And in New Jersey, you must be licensed under a broker to assist others in the transaction or the business of real estate deals. And because I'm licensed, doing it under the guise of a broker, I can receive compensation for my services. So once again, my job is to bring buyers and sellers or landlords and tenants together under the broker's license I work under, and I can receive compensation for doing the transaction. Such a beautiful world. It's a nice deal. Now, there's different roles in a brokerage. Let's start out with the basic concepts of what some of these things are. But before I do, I'm going to ask a basic question. and see what you can tell me. Now, is there a difference between a customer and a client? And if so, what would that difference be? So yes, no, yes. So if there is a difference, what would the difference between a customer and a client be? Customer is potential client. Client is principal. Customer is a third party. Customer is a client. Huh. Client is making happy who you owe. Okay. Nikki Worrell got it. We work for a client and we work with a customer. She's right, or he's right. Sorry, got to be non-transgender specific here. I can't understand anything anymore. But Nikki, you're correct. A customer is someone I'll work with, but a client is someone I will work for, and there's a very big difference. Think about it. Somebody comes in the front door of your company and says, I need help looking for a house. Well, sure, I'd be more than happy to help you find a house. And if I'm successful, I can get paid for doing my job. That's a good deal. But that person who comes in the front door is merely a customer. I'll work with them, but I'm not working for them. And there's, as I said, a very big difference in how I approach this. So you want me to show you houses? Well, I'm available on Saturday. Are you? No? Okay, well, I'm available on Tuesday night. Are you available? No. Well, call me when you get some availability, and I'll look to see if I can squeeze you my schedule to show you houses. That's a customer. A client, as I said, is someone I work with, meaning I have certain obligations and duties to perform to fulfill my client's desire. Whatever their objective is now my objective, since I'm hired as their agent. And I must be loyal to them. I must have duties and responsibilities to their best interest. Customer, if I have time, I'll help you. I'm not going to lie to you or mistreat you, but understand, my clients come first. Customers come second. Clients or principals, some people will call them principals, hire agents to work on their behalf. A principal could be a movie star. She hires an agent to market her pictures and her abilities and her rap and all that stuff to see if she can get roles for that movie star. And if so, she's working for that movie star. But if you're just somebody from Podunk, Utah looking for the big break in Hollywood, you don't have an agent, nobody's going to work for you to get you your roles. You're just going to have to find your own role. And that's going to be tough. So understand there's a difference between a customer, someone I work with, and a client, someone I work for. So good, Nikki. I'm glad you brought that point up. It was dead on. Thank you. So we understand now what a customer and a client is, what a principal, also known as the client, is. Now let's fill out the rest of these terms. Salesperson. The salesperson is going to be you when you get your license. You're authorized under your broker's license to help people buy and sell, bring buyers and sellers and landlords and tenants together in the marketplace and produce sales, of which then you can be paid a commission, and you share your commission with a broker. So I'm not going to open up the dialogue, but Yanni Yang, you've had your dialogue box open for quite a long time. I'm just wondering, do you know that you, okay, there you go, you're off. So please, guys, keep a so Joseph, okay, so I'll open it up for Joseph's question. What? No, now you don't have a question. Guys, please, let's not play this game. Let's keep our professional attention glued to the screen and understand these concepts. Let's not try to distract from the classroom activity. So we've talked about principal, agent, commission, client, customer. The salesperson, as I said, will be you, is hired by the client. Well, actually, they're hiring your brokerage company, not you specifically. But most agents are hired because of who they are and what they do. Sounds confusing, I know, but please understand, the salesperson's role in a brokerage is this big. The broker's role is you can't go that high. It's that big. Why? Because the broker's license is everything. Without you, the salesperson, he could still do business. He could hire a different salesperson. But without the broker, no one can do business. Remember that licensing law yesterday? Salespersons are responsible to the broker that hires them. And the broker is responsible for everything the salesperson does. So when a person wants to sell a house or buy a house or rent an apartment, they're hiring, excuse me, the brokerage company as their agent. You as the salesperson work for the brokerage company. So you as a salesperson are an agent to the broker who is your principal. Your broker then is the agent to the client or principal, another term you could use, to sell their house or help them buy a house or rent an apartment. So let me just illustrate in a whiteboard what I'm talking about. I did this yesterday, but I want to make sure we understand. On top of the heap here is the broker. He's the guy that has the license to do the work. However, the salesperson works under the authority of the broker, who works for the client. The client hires the broker assigns a salesperson who then services the client under the direction of the broker. So again, once again, I just want to stress the importance of understanding that the broker is the agent for the client or principal. The salesperson works for the broker. So in effect, the salesperson is a sub-agent to the client. The client hires the broker who allows the salesperson to work for them. Client, agent, sub-agent. So the agent is a sub-agent to the client through the broker. Did anybody not understand that relationship? Excuse me. Not seeing any questions. Oh, there's Matthew. Okay, so I'll wait. What does principal mean? Adele, it's the same thing as a client. Someone who hires an agent to work on their behalf. Matthew, what do you want me to go over again? There's like 12 different things I just went over. What exactly do you want me to go over again? Just between the, what? I don't know what that means. I don't know what is that Norwegian or Swedish that you're typing there, Matthew? Sub-agent is the salesperson for the client. There you go. The salesperson works for the broker. The broker is the agent of the client. The salesperson is a sub-agent of the client. Okay, you got it. Anybody else with a question? I see a couple people still typing. Aben, you got a question? Agent would be like a company, Remax. It would be the brokerage company, yes. If the client meet broker sales, what? I'm sorry, Alvin, I don't understand what you're asking me. If the client meet broker sales first, do he need to submit to I'm sorry, I still don't understand what you're trying to ask me. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't understand the question. Anybody else with a question? Kieran, Brianna, you guys got questions? No, Kelly, as we said yesterday, realtors, you can only be considered a realtor if you're a member of the National Association of Realtors. If the client meets with the agent directly, it would still need to go through the broker. Oh, if that's the question, Brianna, then yes, that's absolutely true. All relationships go through the broker, not the salesperson. Now, you may be representing your mom in the sale of her house. Okay, good. I'm going to close the conversation, guys. I do need to move on. So you may be getting your mom's house for sale. However, she's not hiring you. She's hiring your brokerage company to sell her house, of which you work for. Your job is to build business for the broker. That's your job as an agent for the broker, a salesperson. By bringing your mom who wants to sell, you're bringing your boss, the broker, a deal of which the relationship is your mom and the broker lets you work for the broker to satisfy the needs of the client or mom. That's the relationship. So I think we now have it in order. Okay, guys, I can't wait for all questions. I do need to move on. So I will pause later for additional questions. So salesperson, principal, agent, commission is what we earn, obviously, client, customer. Yesterday, we talked about a couple things. You could be a seller's broker or a buyer's broker or a disclosed dual broker or a transaction broker. Those were the 4 business relationships. And understanding who works for who in each one of these is important to know. As we said yesterday, if I'm hired to represent the seller, I'm a seller's broker. That means I have a fiduciary obligation to the seller to get them the best price, terms, and conditions I can. If I'm hired by a buyer, then I have a fiduciary obligation to the buyer to get them the best price, terms, and conditions they can get. If I'm hired as a disclosed dual agent, then I represent both buyer and seller in the same transaction, but I do not favor either one. I treat them evenly and fairly and equally. I don't favor one position over the other. My job is to bring them together to make a deal. And as a transaction broker, as we said, I have responsibility to no one. I'm in it just for the paycheck, literally. I have no areas of fiduciary obligation under a transaction brokerage arrangement. So those are the roles in a brokerage house that we now understand. Let's move on. So agency then, since we already clarified what brokerage is, agency is the role that the broker plays as the agent of the principal. You as a salesperson are an agent of the broker. He's your principal, the broker. So by creating an agency agreement, it infers fiduciary relationship. Fiduciary, what does that mean? Fiduciary stems from the root word fidelis, a Greek word, or Latin, my mistake, a Latin word. Fidelis means trust, faithfulness. The Marine Corps has the saying, semper fidelis, meaning always faithful. Marriages fall apart because of infidelity. They're not being faithful. But as an agent working for a client, we have to enter into a fiduciary relationship, a relationship based on trust and faithfulness, as well as it says, confidence. So what are these duties? Oh, by the way, there's different types of agency. But before I get to fiduciary responsibilities, let's talk about different types of agency. Now, I could be a special agent, or I could be a general agent. Or in some very unique cases, I could be a universal agent. So let's examine what these are. Number one, the majority of all real estate transactions involve special agency relationships. So a special agent is hired to do one thing and one thing only. Tim, I'm hiring you to sell my house. Or, Tim, I'm hiring you to help me buy a house. Or, I'm hiring you to help me find an apartment to rent. Or I'm hiring you to represent me, the landlord, in bringing in tenants that I would be satisfied as tenants in my building. Either way, I would create an agency relationship with one person or family or entity for one specific purpose: sell the house, or help me buy a house, or help me rent an apartment. You're being hired to do one thing and one thing only. And that is to help them do what their objective is. So 99.99% of the time, you as the licensee, the salesperson, are going to be working as a special agent on behalf of your client. Not many realtors do other business besides specific agency or special agency. But there is others. There's general agency. And some of you may choose to do general agency. So who does general agency and what does that mean? General agency means I'm not hired to do one thing. I may be hired to do many different things. But I do not have complete 100% control of all things for the client. I'm only in charge of several things. Think of a property manager. A property manager is someone who works on behalf of the owner to market and advertise, to generate leads, to qualify tenant prospects, interview them, do background checks, collect data, make decisions, draw up leases, check in tenants, check tenants out, handle rents, handle security deposits. They may be in charge of doing maintenance, doing bookkeeping, budgeting things. There's many different roles a property manager does. Therefore, a property manager would be termed a general agent. He has many things to do. However, he's not a universal agent. A universal agent is someone who has complete control over another person's affairs. And that can only be accomplished under what is known as a power of attorney. A power of attorney is a document that turns over responsibility of someone's care to another person. I happen to work under a power of attorney for both my parents. They're both in extended care facilities. They're both getting out, they're up there 90 years old, for crying out loud. I hope I don't live to 90. God help me. But I have to be responsible for all their medical needs, all their financial needs, all their healthcare needs, their spiritual needs, their welfare, their physical needs, their emotional needs. I'm responsible for everything about that. So a universal agent has complete control of another person's affair because of a power of attorney document. A general agent maybe have many areas of responsibility, but not complete control. And a special agent is hired for one purpose and one purpose only. Help me buy, help me sell, help me rent, whatever that is. And as I say, you as a salesperson are going to be functioning primarily and almost exclusively as a special agent. Is there any questions about the differences of agency before I move on, or what agency is? Not seeing any questions, then let's move on. Now, there are certain fiduciary responsibilities of an agent working for a principal. And we're going to disclose, we're going to talk about these things. The first responsibility I have is the duty of care. So what's the duty of care? The duty of care means that I have to know my profession in order to do a good job. So if someone called you today and said, hey, I need to sell my house, can you help me? Your answer would be, no, I can't. What? You can't. Why not? Because you don't have the duty of care knowledge yet. What do you mean? Well, what's the process of listing that property? About inspecting it, about putting in the MLS, about marketing and advertising and doing open houses? I don't know. Whatever the broker tells me. Well, there you go. In other words, you're going to have to be trained on how to list property and how to do marketing and advertising and how to do open houses and how to negotiate an objection handle. You have to learn how to do all that stuff before you can actually handle a deal, because you have to know how to do things before you do them. In other words, you're going to have to learn how to do real estate. Just to make the record perfectly clear, and I'll repeat this every day if I have to, I do not teach you how to sell real estate. My job is to teach you to pass a licensing exam. That's it. So if you want me to teach you how to prospect, how to negotiate, how to objection handle, you got the wrong guy. Now, for years and years, I've done sales training with certain companies. And, I enjoyed it, but I don't do that anymore. As I said, I'm getting up there, right? Anyway, not quite, but I'm almost getting ready to retire. As I said, I'm semi-retired. And I know how to exercise the duty of care. But as a new person in the industry, I need to learn how to do listings, how to work with buyers, how to work with landlords, how to work with tenants, how to do property management before I can go out and do it. Because if I don't know what I'm doing, I could not exercise the duty of care, and I could financially destroy someone because of my inability to know what to do. So, as I say to everyone, go out and start interviewing with brokers and ask them all the questions I told you about. And then ask this question: how do you train your new agents? Because training is everything in this business. If you get trained by a professional, you'll do well. But if you don't, you may be lacking. There are some companies that have very strong, dedicated training departments to bring their agents up to speed quickly. And there are other companies that are like, whatever you figure out, you figure out. Well, let me tell you something. You need training, and you need it ASAP. So when you're out interviewing with brokers, which you should be doing now, you got to ask them, what about training? Who trains me? How do I get trained? And what do they teach me? How do you do it? Because you need to know how to list and sell property in order to exercise your duty of care. If you don't know how to property manage, then you should never take on a property management role unless you are trained in how to do it. If you're listing businesses for sale, well, don't do it unless you know what you're doing, because you can financially wreck a company. And I'm not being dramatic here. I'm being very truthful with you. You need to learn how to do the business before you do the business. I teach you how to get a license. It's your broker that teaches you how to do the business. So find a good broker, someone you can work with. That's the first responsibility, is the duty of care. The second one is the duty of obedience. What does that mean, Tim? What do you mean obedience? I don't like that idea. Well, obedience means doing what your client wants you to do. Sell the house. So you've got to sell the house. That's being obedient, selling the house. So what do you do to sell a house? Well, talk to your brokers and find out. They'll train you on how to do that so that you can be obedient to your client. Any lawful requirement or issue that they've got with you, you need to help them understand how to do that. However, if they're asking you to do something unethical or illegal, then no. You draw the line, guys. I'm being very serious here. You draw the line when it comes to being illegal or unethical. Now, there's a lot being said these days about ethics and how people have no ethics, or there's a serious lack of ethics in the business world. And in some areas, I'm going to say that's absolutely true. But I will tell you this, in order to do your job, when you get hired by a broker, you're going to have to swear allegiance to a code of ethics, and it's in the back of your book. So when you get an extra, few minutes sometime during the day or night, flip back into the back of your book. The code of ethics is in there. It's broken down into 3 parts. It teaches you about your relationships with clients and customers, your relationships with other brokers and salespersons, and how to act in the general public and how your relationships are formed that way. So understand, guys, we have to be obedient, but not blind obedience. I was just following orders is not a good defense. Do you have a head on your shoulders? You have a brain between those ears? Use it. Learn what's ethical and what's not. You should have a basic understanding by now. By the time you're 18 years old, you should have a basic understanding of what's ethical and what's not. So if your client says, don't tell them about the cracked foundation, you tell the buyer, by the way, there's a cracked foundation, because that seller asked you to do something unethical. Don't obey blindly, guys. Think. Use your brains. So you have a duty of care. You have a duty of obedience. You also have a duty of accounting. What? Yeah, remember yesterday we talked about people giving you cash and checks and safeguarding funds? That's accounting. Accounting for people's money. Guys, people are going to give you money. That's a wonderful thing. Hey, here's 10 grand. Ooh, yeah. It's not your money. And as we said, you have a requirement that when a client gives you funds to deposit in your escrow account, then you've got 5 days to get that money in the account, to safeguard it, to protect that money, to give a receipt to the client when receive the money so you can be held accountable for the money being transacted. So understand, guys, accounting means money, but it also means your behavior. If you say you're going to do something, then you damn well better do it. Excuse the language, ladies. You damn well better do it. Because if you don't, then you don't have integrity. Always mean what you say and do what you say you're going to do. Because if you don't, then as far as I'm concerned, you have no integrity and you're not accountable for what you say. We are to be held accountable for what we say at all periods. So be a person of integrity. We're halfway through. The 4th one is the duty of loyalty. Obviously, you're going to be loyal to your client. Do what's best and right for them. But it also infers keeping confidential information confidential. So you guys have the luxury of sitting behind a computer and I don't see your pictures. Your cameras are not on. Your microphones are not on. So I don't hear or see what you're doing. That's okay. You can do anything you want because you're home safe. Nobody's watching you as far as I'm concerned. But you have a duty of loyalty to yourself, as well as holding confidential information confidential. Now, if I asked everybody to raise their hand and ask you, who's a truthful person out there that doesn't spread rumors or tell secrets? Everybody, oh, you can trust me. Yeah, I'm the guy. And there's others who are like, not me. Well, at least you're being truthful. I appreciate it. So I'm going to propose a scenario, and I want you to listen to the scenario. I go on a listing appointment. And at the listing appointment, the sellers say, Tim, we really love your program. We're going to list with you. And as we're listing the property and as the paperwork's being drawn up, the seller says this to me, by the way, this is for your ears only. And that is, the wife and I are getting divorced. You can't tell that to buyers. You can't tell that to other brokers, salespeople, because if the word got out, then they know if we're getting divorced, there's going to be a divorce decree at some point which says we have to sell the house, and then they're going to lowball us and we're not going to get the price we need for the house. So you cannot tell anybody we're getting divorced. So I list the property. People come and look at the house. Brokers call me up and they ask me, how come they're selling? And I tell them they're getting divorced. No, I don't. Remember, I heard something in confidence. They said, don't tell anybody else. Guys, your duty of confidence is an indicator of who you are. Can you keep a secret? Can you keep what's precious to someone sacred to them? Or do you blab your mouth out in hopes for a quick buck and making the deal happen quicker? That's the difference between a person of integrity and a person who does not care. And my suggestion to you is, as an agent to that person, that client, principal, that you have an obligation to keep that information confidential. So here's the scenario. I list their property. And for 6 months, no bites, no offers, nothing. And after 6 months, they say, Tim, we've decided to go with another broker because you didn't do your job. C'est la vie, bye-bye. And now they list with another broker. And a week later, a guy comes in my front door and says, hey, I'm looking for a specific type of house. And I say, I know the house you're looking for. And it's the house we're talking about, the one I just lost. Now, I'm working for the buyer. What do I tell them? What do I tell them? Since I'm working for the buyer, Heather says nothing, just a bunch of funny words. They're getting a divorce. Of course I would, Steve. Or would I? No, I would not. Let me moderate this conversation. It's going to blow up on me. No, I do not. And the reason is I learned this information while I was their agent. And it was told to me in confidence. Even though the agency relationship no longer exists, I still have an obligation to keep confidential information confidential. So, Mr. Buyer, I can't tell you why they're selling. I suspect they're maybe having a change of life and looking to move out. So let's go look at the house. But I cannot spill the beans because I pledged while being an agent that I would keep that information sacred. And now that I'm no longer their agent, it does not free me from that obligation. That obligation still follows me. So guys, confidentiality extends beyond the agency relationship. Even after that relationship ends, that sacred word must be kept sacred. It's confidential. It's not to be transmitted to anybody else. Ethics are everything in our business. If I can't trust you to keep that secret, then you're fired. If I can't trust you to do the job you say you're going to do, you're fired. And as a broker, my liability and my reputation is on the line if my agent can't keep their mouth shut. And if they open their mouth and spill the beans and my client suffers because of it, I'm sorry, but you're fired. So understand, guys, this duties, responsibilities, ethics, it all plays into being a good realtor. And I'm not sitting here from a position of authority or a moral high horse telling you all this. I'm just talking to you about being a good salesperson. Just being a damn good person is all it takes. But if you're not a good person, this job may not be for you. Yeah, you'll make a few bucks quick, but once people start finding out what you're like, your reputation will precede you. And you know that because if anybody's worked with realtors before, you may have heard people say, no, not that person. Use this other person. They're very trustworthy. Your reputation will precede you in this business. So be conscious of that. So we've covered 4 obligations. Before I move on, does anybody have any questions to clarify anything we've talked about? If a buyer tells you in confidence they can pay higher but want to try for a lower price and you work for the seller, do you owe the obedience to the seller to tell them the loyalty to the buyer? Yes, since I've already disclosed to the buyer, Rachel, I work for the seller. So if they tell me they're going to make an offer but could go higher, I'm going to tell the seller this is just a smoke screen. They can go much higher. Because guess what? I work for the seller, Mr. Buyer, and anything you tell me is going to be used against you in the court of negotiation. And yeah, I would. Because I don't have a relationship with the buyer, I have a relationship with the seller. I'm the seller's agent. I don't represent the buyer. Anybody else? So if it's opposite, then you keep it private. If I'm working for the buyer, then I keep that information quiet. But I'm working for the seller. I'm going to tell the seller what you told me. I never promised to keep your information quiet. I don't work for you. I work for that other person. All right. So let me moderate and we'll move on. All right. The duty of disclosure, also known as duty of notice. This is a good question, a good topic to talk about. So in listing a property, the seller says to me, just so you know, and I want to keep this confidential, that a car ran into the house about 4 years ago and struck the corner of the house. It jeopardized the structural integrity, but it looks fine. Don't tell anybody about it. Well, at that moment, I have to tell the seller this. Mr. Seller, I can understand why you would not want me to tell them that. However, under my agency relationship, I have a duty to disclose material information about the property. What does that mean? Material information is any information that could affect the price or perception of price of an item in a marketplace. So, Mr. Seller, I do have to tell buyers about the car hitting the corner of the house and then there may be structural damage. I have to, by law, it's required. I'm not saying that your information is confidential. I'm just saying I have to disclose it, whether you want me to or not. It's required of me. It's material information about the value of the property. Your divorce is not material information. The crack in the corner of the house is. The foundation, it's got some problems. I have to disclose that. The septic isn't working. I have to disclose that. But we're not going to get the price we want. You're going to get the price that you get because of the condition of the house that it's in. And if I don't tell people, they're going to find out in a home inspection and say, how come you didn't tell us about this? And now I got some backtracking to do, and my reputation's on the line, and I may be brought up on ethics charges for non-disclosure material information, and that could affect my licensing status. So no thanks, I don't want to play that game. I must disclose anything that could affect the value of that property to anyone who asks. Anyone. That includes structural integrity of the property, issues with neighbors. What? Yeah. I was showing a house, this is bizarre. I was showing a house in Franklin Lakes. It was a nice house, 3.2 million. And the couple who were buying it, doctors, both of them, and they were really turned on by the house until we went out on the back deck. And as we went out on the back deck, I heard the wife kind of give a little scream and went back in the house. I go, what's the matter? And the husband says, look, over there, the next door neighbor. He's out naked in his yard gardening. Like, what the hell? Apparently, from the homeowner afterwards, I found out this guy's a nudist and he walks around all day in his yard naked. And his neighbors, they can see him. That's material information that I need to disclose to any and all buyers who come to see that house because it could affect the value perception of that house. It's a very important thing to disclose material information. What about that guy across the street with the loud parties every Friday night? Do I have to disclose that? Yes. Wow. Well, what about the guy across town who, has a big problem over there? Well, if it doesn't affect this property, then no, it's not material information. But the neighbor's activities certainly could be material information. Hey, what's going on with the house next door? I see it's all boarded up and everything. Oh, that's a crack house. There's people doing drugs in there every night. Well, I think we'll look somewhere else for a house. I have to disclose all material information about a property. By law, I'm required to. Whether the seller wants me to or not is regardless of the fact that I'm required to. Material information is not just about the physical structure, it's about the client themselves. So I represent a buyer. And we find a house we want to buy. And we put it in an offer. And as we're negotiating the offer, the buyer calls me up and says, hey, Tim, don't tell the sellers, but I just lost my job and I can't get a mortgage. But let's see if we can get the house. I have a problem. Because I have a responsibility to disclose that my client can no longer qualify to buy this house. I have to do that whether my buyer wants me to say that or not. If he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have a mortgage, how's he going to buy a house? He's not going to be able to get a mortgage. Does he have the cash? No. Then I have to disclose to the seller, this guy can't buy your house, just so you know. That's a responsibility on me. It's a heavy responsibility, but I'm required by law to disclose material information, which could also mean the ability of the client to perform. Now, I've witnessed recently quite a few buyer's agents misrepresenting their buyer's ability to buy. We live in a market right now in this area of the state, northern New Jersey, where houses come on the market one day and have 7 offers by the end of the day. The problem is all those offers come in cash, no mortgage contingency, no inspection contingencies, until you start asking questions. Yeah, can I see the proof of funds on your offer? Or we don't have proof of funds. Well, then you're not a valid cash buyer as far as I'm concerned. But we can get it. It doesn't matter. You're coming as a cash buyer. I want to see proof of funds. I need a letter from your attorney stating you have X amount of dollars in a specific bank account ready to purchase a house with, and it's not used for any other purpose. Can you produce such proof of funds? No. Then you're not a cash buyer. I have to understand that. I have to disclose that. Hey, Mr. Seller got an offer. He claims to be a cash buyer, but he's not. He's going to convert to a mortgage as soon as he wins the bid, just like most of them do. So understand, guys, I must be truthful in my disclosures at all times. And I must be truthful because I have an ethical responsibility to how I do business. Wow. What else about disclosure do I need to know, Tim? My licensing status. Remember yesterday I said it's required that all realtors disclose who they are when first meeting people. Hi, my name's Tim Jets with ABC Real Estate. I work for the seller. That way they know I'm the agent for ABC Real Estate and I represent the seller. So do you think they're going to voluntarily tell me that they have trouble with their credit and can't get a mortgage? Probably not. So I am required to disclose not only who I am and who I work for and who my clients are, but everything that has material effect on the value of a property. Questions, anybody? I read that there is a brutal murder in a house that you don't have to disclose in New Jersey. Wouldn't that lower the property value? Was that an article you read, Rachel? Was it a law case? What was the source of your statement? It's in the book. I'll have to find it. Oh, I understand. I know where you're at. You're back in the back of the book, the back of the chapter. So here's the question. The question is, do I have to disclose that there was a murder in the house? The answer is no, I don't. I'm not required to. But wait a minute. Wouldn't a buyer's perception of value change if they knew there was a murder in the house? Maybe, maybe not. Everyone is different about this type of thing. Let's talk about murders, suicides, deaths in a property. Happens quite often, by the way. People die everywhere. In buildings and houses and offices and open spaces and cars. They die everywhere. It's a pandemic. It's killing us. People dying everywhere. But the fact is, some people do die in houses or commit suicide or are murdered in a house. I'm going to moderate here for real quick. Does that affect the value of the property? To some, yes. To others, no. It's a neutral item, believe it or not. Therefore, it's non-required as a disclosure item. But Tim, I would be very upset to learn that someone was murdered in the house. And why is that? Because people were murdered. What does that mean? People were murdered. So, but doesn't that affect the value? Not that I'm aware of. What? Guys, I'm going to relate a little story. Many of you may have heard about it, but it's about a house in Westfield, New Jersey. It's called the Watcher House. So many of you guys right now are Googling or searing the Watcher House in Westfield, New Jersey. What happened was this, about a dozen years ago or so. A house came on the market for $1.3 million in Westfield, New Jersey. Westfield's a nice little Tony town near the Garden State Parkway someplace, around Route 22 or so. But anyway, and the seller sold the property to a young couple with kids. As soon as the young couple with kids moved in the house, the young couple with kids, the buyers started getting anonymous letters signed The Watcher. And the letters would be things like, I saw you and your children in the kitchen in their little print dresses making sugar cookies for Christmas. Signed The Watcher. Who the hell's looking in my house? And they would get these letters every so often, leading the owners to believe someone was stalking them. So they tried to sell the house. Couldn't sell the house because now everybody heard about this story about the Watcher. They couldn't find out who the Watcher was. So the buyers of the house called the realtor and said, did you know about this? And the realtor said, oh yeah, I knew about it. And so the real estate broker and pretty much everybody in town knew about it. Well, why didn't you tell me? Because it's a non-disclosure item. What? It doesn't affect the value. To us it does, but to others it won't. They tried to sue the seller, lost their case. They tried to sue the real estate broker. They lost their case. Why? Because an anonymous letter coming to a property in a non-threatening manner is not a material effect on value. The problem is they couldn't sell the house. In fact, it took them up to last year to sell the house, and they only sold it for something like $950,000. So now they claim they lost $400,000 in value, which is a material effect from selling the house at such a low price. And it's the only way they could sell it. Netflix, I think, made a movie out of this, if you're interested. But the fact remains, as a realtor, am I required to disclose things that may or may not affect the value of the property? Murder, suicide, deaths, the Watcher. And here's the other category. What about a ghost? Ah, oh my God. What if there's a ghost in the house? Do I disclose that? I don't know. Do I? This is a tough question. So now I'm going to refer you to the Ghostbusters law. The what? Years ago up in Nyack, New York, a woman was selling her home for sale by owner. And a man responded to her ads and looked at the house and said, I'm interested, and gave her a deposit. A couple days later, as the man was doing some work, a neighbor came up to him. They started talking, and it turns out he knew about that house he was buying. He said, "So the fact that there's a ghost in the house doesn't bother you, huh?" He goes, "What? She didn't say anything about a ghost." "Oh, yeah, she wrote an article a year or so ago. It was in the newspaper." He went down to the library, pulled up the article. Sure enough, here's an article from the seller stating how she's communing with the ghost in the attic. He goes to the woman and says, "Lady, you got to give me my money back. I could never buy a house with a ghost in it." She said, "No, we have a contract." He says, "But you didn't disclose this." She says, "I don't have to." So he took her to court and sued her. The judge's rendering of a verdict came in the following manner. "Ma'am, you have a supposed ghost in the house. The question is, does that affect the material value of the property?" Well, the judge analyzed this and said it's much like a murder, suicide, or death, where some people may be turned off by it, but just so many people could be turned on by it. So his decision was the following. The woman had to return only half of the deposit to the buyer, because the judgment was the seller was under no obligation or law to have to disclose the presence of a ghost. However, the man got half his deposit back because the judge said, ethically, however, you should have. So my question to you now, based on that fact of the ethics involved, if you get a house, a listing, and the seller says there's a ghost or a death or suicide or murder in it, would you disclose? What would you do? The law says you don't have to, but ethics says you should. What would you do? Would you disclose? If the seller wanted me to. You didn't answer the question. Maybe not. Okay. No, not needed. I would. Depends on my client. I would disclose and laugh about it. Okay, good answers, guys. So disclose it in a nice way in order to see the reaction. Very good. Depends on our client. Okay, thank you for your input. I appreciate that. So here's the thing. And yes, Ashley, there you go. You hit it on the head. Think about it, guys. You're the agent. You've heard of being empathic, meaning put yourself in your client's shoes. If I was that buyer, would I want to know about it? And if so, tell them. My opinion is of this, and it's only my opinion. We know that I have to disclose. So my policy is disclose, disclose, disclose. When in doubt, however, disclose. Why? Because what harm can you do by telling the truth? If I don't disclose, I'm actually robbing my purchaser of all the information they need to know to make an independent decision, and I've made their decision for them. And that's not fair to the client. So law and ethics come into play here, where you're not required to disclose the presence of ghosts, murders, suicides, or deaths in a property, but you should. So maybe one of the criteria you ask a buyer is, would you entertain the possibility of buying a house that would have a ghost, murder, suicide, or death in it? Does that bother you? If they say no, then there's no problem. But if they say yes, then you don't show them the houses with murders, deaths, suicides, and ghosts in them. So I know we're sitting on a fence here on this disclosure thing about ghosts, suicides, and murders and things like that. But guys, ethics plays a very big part in your ability to do your job. So know your client. Know what they need and want, so when you present information, it's adequate for their need. Does anybody have any follow-up questions to that discussion? Hear me out. If the family was murdered, but the area isn't a great area crime-wise, do you disclose? I'm under no obligation to disclose. However, I have an ethical obligation to disclose, so I'm going to leave it in your own hands, Luciana. I'm not going to answer your question. If the buyer has the cash to buy the property, but it's in between jobs, is it still our duty to disclose that they're unemployed at the time purchase? Christopher, if they have proof of funds, then it doesn't matter if they have a job or not. They can buy the house with cash. It doesn't matter. It's not a material fact. What if your broker asks you not to disclose? Then you do what your broker tells you to do. Would the MLS tell you this info? Not necessarily, no. When it comes up after attorney review is complete, means of getting out of a contract, possible. Why would you put that in the MLS? I wouldn't. My job is to try to sell the house, not to steer people away from it. If it's public knowledge like the Amityville home, do I have to give out info to public? Guys, maybe we're missing the point. I said you're not under any legal obligation to disclose. However, you should know your client. And that way you can tell them in confidence that, listen, this is the story of the house. How do you feel about that? Where would you find if there was a murder or suicide in the house? Is it something the owner should tell you? Possibly. You can look on police records and library information, paper histories. There's neighbors. Went plenty of places to find that stuff out. Isn't it unethical not to disclose horrible things like that naked man? Yes, that's why it's imperative that I have to say to people, before we go see this house, just so you know, there's a naked guy running around next door. Does that bother you? Yeah. Well, then let's not go look in the house. What if the owner does not disclose anything, such as a car hitting the house? Then, Mr. Seller, they're going to find out about it during the home inspection. And they're going to say, hey, what's going on here? And then you're going to have to tell them the truth. And then they're going to say, well, if you're hiding that, what else are you hiding? What else do we not know about? You're going to build an atmosphere of distrust, and we don't want that. So it's imperative that we do disclose the physical problems of the property. If the seller's your client, they ask you directly not to expose. Well, then I keep my pants on, Kelly. All right, not seeing any other questions. Let's move on. The general duty of fair dealing is the last fiduciary obligation or responsibility I have. Meaning, whether you're a client or not, whether you're a customer or a client, does not matter. I have an ethical responsibility to treat all parties equally and fairly and tell the truth. Guys, you can work with customers and be truthful and honest with them. But if it's your client, you're going to bend over backwards and perform cartwheels in trying to help them accomplish their tasks or their objectives. With a customer, if I got time, I'll help you. But if you're a client, I clear the decks. You're my first priority. Let's get busy. So I have a duty of general fair dealing with people, whether they're my client or not, to always treat them honestly and fairly. Not to lie, not to mislead, but to treat them with respect. And everyone deserves your respect and dignity. Everyone. All right, so those are my fiduciary responsibilities when I'm entering into an agency relationship. Any follow-up questions to these before we move on? Backtracking. We do that often. Nothing new. So it doesn't physically affect the property. You don't have to disclose, but in certain cases, ethics may dictate that you should disclose. Possibly, Charles, yes. All right. Not seeing any other questions or comments. I am going to move on. What about sexual predators? Ah, Nick, you're reading my mind because that's what I was about to talk about. Let's talk about sexual predators now. Oh, wow, what an uplifting conversation for a Tuesday morning, Tim. Well, it's one we have to have, guys, because unfortunately it's an issue in our communities everywhere. So under the Megan's Law, sexual predators who have been convicted of crimes must register with police departments as to their whereabouts. The state police keeps track of all this information. The local municipalities try to keep as much abreast of where people are living as they can. And those predators are required, as a condition of their release from incarceration, to report to the municipal authorities of their living arrangements where they live. This is not public knowledge per se. And if I'm showing property and a person says this, Tim, we really like the house. Are there any sexual predators in the area that would dissuade us from wanting to buy this property? Here's what I have to remember, and that is under Megan's Law, it specifically states this: realtors, real estate licensees, are prohibited from disseminating any information about the presence of sexual predators in neighborhoods, even if the agent knows it to be true. So the answer, Nikki, to your question is, I'm not allowed to disclose the presence of sexual predators in neighborhoods. I know it sounds ridiculous and backwards thinking, but it's the law. In fact, the state of New Jersey goes so far as to say buyers of real estate are not entitled to know about this information until after they close on the property. Then they're entitled to know about it. That's the state law in New Jersey. But to me, that's not sufficient. I think everybody should know what they get into before they get into it. So how I get around this law, and it is the law, realtors are precluded from disseminating any information about sexual predators in neighborhoods, even if they know it to be true. We're not allowed to say anything. So what I do is this: when working with buyers, we have about 5 houses we're going to see today on our tour. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Before we start looking at houses, if you see a house that you really are turned on by and want to pursue, you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, owe it to yourself to check out the website I'm about to give you, njsp.org, NewJerseyStatePolice.org. And enter into the, and when you're on that site, enter the information about the property and see what it says. That site will tell you if there are sexual predators living in the area or not. I can't disseminate that information. So if we're standing in front of a house and you ask me that question, I'm going to say, did you check your website yet? Because I can't be the source of this information. But Tim, what if you're working with like your brother and their 2 little kids? You're not going to tell them? And the answer is, by law, I'm prohibited from telling them that. Why? Isn't that ethical to tell them? Now we can get into discussion that will last us through kingdom come, guys. But here's the fact. I'm not allowed to disclose this information. If I prepare my clients properly before we go out to look at houses, they'll know what website to access to find out information. If they find out information, they'll just tell me, no, we don't want to pursue that house. Let's go find something else. Or, yes, now let's go pursue that house. But I can't be the source of that information. Yes, I don't agree with the law, but that's the law, and I have to work within it. I hope I answered your question, Nikki, and it's not a favorable answer, I'm sure, but it is the answer that we are told, and as being real estate licensees, that we must follow. Did anybody have any other questions about this before I move on? Good question. Thank you for asking that. Apparently there's some questions, so I'll hang on. We can't disclose because it could be considered steering? No, because it could stigmatize an entire neighborhood. I tried the website first by putting in address, nothing. They looked for list sexual predators, nothing. Okay. I think that's so messed up. Well, you're not the only one. If a client looks up the house on the website and they find a predator, can you talk about it after they mention it to you? I would just say, what would your decision be? I wouldn't talk about it. It's up to them to decide what they want to do. It's on main page, okay? Is there a list somewhere? Sex offender, double standards. Well, it is what it is, guys. We have to work within the framework of the law. We cannot assume that we know better than the law. Understand that, please. njsp.org is where you would go to find that out. All right. Anybody else before I move on? Not seeing anything. Let me moderate and continue. Now, let's try to get a better discussion going here. The broker-salesperson relationship. Once again, let's stress the importance of our roles here. The broker is the agent to the client, the seller, the buyer, whoever it is. You as a salesperson work for the broker as an agent representing the best interests of the broker. So you got to do what the broker tells you to do. Salesperson has no authority to make contracts or receive compensation. Only the broker does. So the salesperson is responsible to the broker under who they're licensed. Therefore, you are an agent to the broker and a sub-agent to the principal. We talked about this yesterday. I just want to reiterate it once again. But if there's a question, it looks like, Jermaine, you have a question. So what's your question? No, no question? All right, no question. Now, independent contractor versus employee. This is imperative that we understand how this works. So I'm assuming many of you have been an employee in the past, working for an employer. That means that as an employee, you're required to show up at a certain place at a certain time to do certain things in a certain way and have a supervisor approve or oversee what you do, so that when the end of the week comes, you can get your paycheck because you did what was required. And that's nice. You get a guaranteed paycheck for doing your job. New Jersey is an at-will employment state. There is no guaranteed right to work. So if at any time an employer says you're fired or I'm laying you off, that's it. You're done. And unfortunately, because of COVID, many folks lost their jobs because the businesses can't sustain no income and still have to pay out salaries and monthly or weekly paychecks. They can't do it. So an employee is someone who works for an employer under an employment agreement. And their obligations to work for that employer under the terms and conditions the employer states. You must be at certain places, do certain things at certain times in a certain way, get approval of your supervisors, et cetera, et cetera. And if you do, you get a paycheck. And when you get your paycheck, they take out things like FICA and Social Security, unemployment insurance. They have pension plans maybe, or savings accounts, or they pay part of your health care or sponsor all of your health care, which is great if you can get it. So there's many things taken out of your paycheck, and when you get your paycheck, it's not all that money you thought it was. I remember when my son got his first real job, and he got his first paycheck, and he says, I think they're ripping me off. Hey, welcome to the real world, son. Where's all this money go? And I had to tell him about taxes and unemployment insurance and Social Security and all that other stuff. He's like, that's not fair. I said, but that's the way it works. But you don't have to worry about that. Well, actually, I do, but in a different way. As an independent contractor, I don't get a paycheck for showing up. As an independent contractor, I don't get a weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly payroll check. I don't get anything unless I produce money income to the broker, a deal, sale, rental, whatever. As the commission is earned by the broker, he splits it with me within 10 days after he gets paid. And because I'm an independent contractor, I get a lump sum fee for the entire amount I'm due. There's no taxes taken out of my paycheck. There's no savings plan. There's no pension or benefits. There's no health care taken out of my paycheck. The only thing taken out of my paycheck are things like franchise fees to the company I work for, advertising, listing fees, and things like that that the broker wants me to pay for. That's it. Therefore, none of my taxes are paid out of my payroll. When I get paid, I get a lump sum fee for my job. As an independent contractor, that means I have extra responsibility here. When I had a company in Clifton, I hired this new guy. His name was John, and John today is one of my best friends. He's a competing broker in another area of the state. But anyway, when I hired him, he's this guy right out of school, full of juice, full of piss and vinegar, and he wanted to turn the world on end. And he did. He went out and he got 2 listings within his first 2 weeks of employment. Had one of them won contract on the 3rd week, got a buyer to buy another house on the 4th week. This guy was on a roll to start with. I mean, he was all that and more. And as his first closing came, I brought him into my office and said, John, I just want to tell you, I have your first check. He said, yeah, I know, it's going to be a good one. His first check was for 11 grand. And I said, what are you going to do? He goes, I'm going to have a whopping good time. I said, that's good. You deserve it. You go out and you get toasted. Go have fun. However, you have responsibilities, John. What do you mean? This check doesn't account for any taxes, doesn't take out any savings accounts, doesn't pay for any health care or anything else. So may I suggest something to you, and that would be take 1/3 of that paycheck and put it away into a savings account and don't touch it. Why would I do that? Because you're going to have to pay the tax man at the end of the year. And assuming on the current basis that you're running, you're going to be in at least a 30% tax bracket. So take 1/3 of your paycheck and put it into an account to pay for your taxes when they're due, or else you're going to be in big trouble. That's a good idea. Okay. Secondly, take another 1/3 and stuff it away into another savings account and don't touch it. Why would I do that? Because there might be some months you don't get a paycheck. There may be some weeks that you go without any income, but you still have all those bills to pay, don't you? Yeah. That way, you'll have the ability to steady your income over time, always have resources to pay your bills, and you'll be more successful, and people will admire what you're doing. Okay, boss, great idea. Thanks for the tip. Here's your check, 11 grand, and he's out the door. That was on a Friday. I didn't see him Saturday. I didn't see him Sunday. He came in Monday, and he's like, I said, what's up, John? Yeah. Looks like you had a whopping good weekend. Oh, yeah. The gal and I, we went down. We had a blast in Atlantic City. How much did you lose? I lost a lot. How much is a lot, John? All 11 grand. Ow, how are you going to pay your bills? I don't know. How are you going to pay your rent? I don't know. What about your car payment? I don't know. How are you going to eat? I don't know. What does your girlfriend think? As soon as I lost the last dollar, she left me. Same old sad story. Poor John. Here he is. Has no money to pay his taxes, although he still owes them. Has no money to pay his bills, although he still owes them. Can't even have a smile because his girlfriend left him because he lost all his money. Now, I knew John had closings coming up, so I advanced him a payroll to win his next deal, and he was very grateful. And he learned his lesson very quickly. And that was to always put a third away for taxes, a third away for additional expenses at some point where you don't have income. That way you can always have spendable income when you need it. And he became very successful. He got his broker's license, opened up his own company, and he's doing very, very well today. I always get together with John maybe every two or three times a year. We always have dinner. But I got to tell you, unless you go through being an independent contractor, which you will, you don't know the responsibility you have to be responsible for your money. No one likes to talk about this, about, oh, you guys, all you do is sit around and drink coffee, make millions of dollars, and that's about it. No, you're going to work your ass off, ladies and gentlemen. You are. And for your work, you're going to be paid, and probably well. Therefore, be responsible for your income. Save money when you can. Prepare for bills that are to come. And if you don't mind me saying, get a professional tax accountant that can help you minimize your tax burden. As an independent contractor, you're allowed to write off your expenses against your income. So you're going to have to learn what expenses you can write off and what you can't. And to maximize those, you do need a good accountant. It's going to cost you a few dollars, but they're going to save you a ton of money. And you just might have a little extra money at the end of the year because of that. So understand, guys, as an independent contractor, you don't have to be anywhere at any time to do anything for any supervisor in any specific way. You can do whatever you want. But if you're not producing, you're not getting paid. So if you're not getting paid, you're in tough luck. All right, so let's take a break. It's 10:30. I'll leave the conversation open for the next half hour. At 11 o'clock, I'll rejoin you, and we'll pick up our conversation and move on. You really need to put away. No, I'm actually, Rachel, I'm being a little dramatic in that 1/3. But somebody who hasn't done this before, it's a nice way to learn that by doing the right things, you may have a little extra bump at the end of the year because of all that extra money you've got in the bank. Just to say. All right, so guys, we'll see you in a half hour.